One of the most gruesome, hopeless places in history was in England in the early parts of the 19th century. It was called the Debtors' Prison. And that's a picture of Marshallsea's Debtors' Prison. It's a place where Charles Dickens' father was imprisoned for the debts that he had that he couldn't pay back. Charles Dickens wrote numerous books, stories, and in one of them he referenced this debtor's prison reality. England's poorest lived in these debtor's prisons all over the country. Everything the debtor owned was taken away. And some accounts describe how even the very clothing that they wore was taken away. They were imprisoned in these places until they could pay back every debt. Which begs the silly question, how do they expect them to pay it back if they're imprisoned and unable to do anything? It was a situation Dickens describes as being completely without hope. That was what was called civilized 19th century England. According to ancient Jewish laws, there were moral limits that were placed upon what could and could not be taken away from somebody who was in debt. Among those things that were legally off limits, that you could not take from somebody in payment for their debts, was their cloak, their main piece of clothing. Less substantial garments could be taken in payment for debt, but not a person's cloak. It was in a category all by itself. A cloak offered warmth, protection. It provided modesty. It shielded a person from nakedness. You could take a lot away from a person 2,000 years ago in the Middle East for the debts that they owed you. Even taking their children, you could not take a cloak. A cloak could always be offered, though. Sir Walter Raleigh legendarily swept his cloak off his shoulders and flung it over a mud puddle so that the Queen of the British Empire would not get her foot wet stepping into the puddle. In today's gospel text from Matthew chapter 21, cloaks were offered to Jesus for theological reasons, for practical reasons of praise. As Jesus prepared to enter into Jerusalem proper, he intentionally changes things up finally now. His Galilean ministry is now at an end. He's days away from his crucifixion. So the time for keeping a low profile is now over. It's a messianic moment happening before them. Jesus had already announced to his disciples the fate that was awaiting him outside of Jerusalem in but a few days' time. As Jesus crosses into Jerusalem, the Calvary cross was already ready, waiting for him. He chose to embody the image of the humble king, the meek Messiah, as Zechariah prophesied about in Zechariah 9 in the Old Testament. Riding on a small, simple donkey, the colt of a foal, the foal of a colt. He chose to embody the humble image of the king, full of obedience and humility. And soon enough, even the very cloak off his back would be taken from him. And he would be ready for all the cruelties, all the punishment that would be inflicted on him, and for the sacrifice of his own life on the cross. Although Holy Week, which Palm Sunday begins, and Good Friday would dreadfully demonstrate the depth of betrayal and rejection that Jesus would face, on that Palm Sunday 2,000 years ago, for the brief, exciting moment in his life, his disciples and the crowds from Galilee offered Jesus with absolute full praise and support. His disciples gave him their cloaks off their backs to put on the donkey for Jesus to ride on. The exuberant crowd took the cloaks off their backs and threw them on the roadway for Jesus to ride on the donkey into the city of Jerusalem, to create a royal pathway for Jesus as he entered into the city. However, Jesus' fellow travelers from Galilee had not understood much of everything that Jesus was trying to teach them. They do not still have a clue about all the events that are yet to unfold before them in this week ahead, called Holy Week. But this crowd of well-wishers have witnessed the miracles that Jesus had performed, the healing of blind and lame, the feeding of thousands of people, and they recognize Jesus as the prophet of God. They celebrate the power of God that Jesus brings. And the people are momentarily moved beyond their own concerns, moved beyond their own hidden agendas, and they wish only to find some way to offer some adequate form of praise to this man who offers them hope, even though their hope is misguided. But he's offering them hope and a promise of a different kind of future. The joy of prayers and praise overwhelm these ordinary people, and they find themselves offering to Jesus whatever it is that they can give him, including the very clothes off their back, in order to somehow show Jesus, with their simple sacrificial gesture, the miracle of this moment, that it has touched them indeed. When was the last time you felt so filled with gratitude for the blessings of God in your life? So prayerful for others in our lives and beyond. So energized by the change, the transformation that God seeks to bring into people's lives. So angered at injustices that are all around us, that you felt you had to do whatever it is possible, even to give the very shirt off your back if necessary, in order to help participate with God in bringing about real change in our world. Giving the shirt off your back doesn't work too well in Canadian winters. Even this morning when I was walking, it was still 0 degrees. And I wouldn't recommend literally giving the shirt off your back. But it's way more than just that, isn't it? Bearing your soul, revealing yourself to the world in the cause of Christ, to help to do Christ's work in our world. What does it take to get the proverbial shirt off our backs? When you're walking down the street and witnessing men and women and youth living nowhere. The woman that I buried or conducted a funeral for on Friday here at the church was a street mom to many street youth who found in her heart an open home, a welcome, and a non-judgmental, caring presence. When we walk down the street and see people pushing their worldly possessions in a grocery cart, or when we're holding a daycare toddler whose clothes are ragged and smelly, whose eyes focus first on food because they're so hungry. Those are experiences that tug the shirts off our backs. So maybe on Palm Sunday, we can relearn, we need to relearn, how to bear our souls in the cause of Christ. To allow God's Spirit to work through us to provide the care to those all around us that He's waiting to offer through us. On Palm Sunday, we need to shift the stuff off our backs so we can be freed up again to notice the miracles that God is doing in our world still. On Palm Sunday, we need to slough off cynicism. Yes, we all have a cynic inside of us. But to get rid of that and to lend our backs to support people around us. On Palm Sunday, we need to strip away our judgmentalism, judging others, and instead to be enveloped by our unity of our humanity and our brotherhood and sisterhood as followers of Jesus Christ. On Palm Sunday, we need to expose the smallness of our vision and instead embrace the goodness and the presence of God's amazing grace, here and now and always. On Palm Sunday, we need to celebrate Christ's presence in our hearts today and every day, and anticipate Christ's fullness in every day of our future. On the 18th of November, 1995, the Israeli-American violinist Itzhak Perlman came on stage to give a concert at Avery Fisher Hall in the Lincoln Center in New York City. Have you ever seen him play or heard him play? If you have ever been to one of his concerts, you know that getting on stage for him is no small feat. He was stricken with polio as a child, and so he has braces on both legs and walks with 2 crutches and carries his violin. So to see him walk across the stage one step at a time, painfully and slowly, is an unforgettable sight. He walks in obvious pain, but yet he walks majestically until he reaches his chair. And he sits down and slowly unfastens the braces and pushes one leg behind him and one leg in front of him. And then he opens up his violin case and pulls it out, sticks it under his chin, and nods to the conductor and proceeds to play. The audience is quite used to this ritual of his. They sit quietly while he makes his way across the stage to his chair and he settles himself in and gets ready to play. But on this one occasion, in November 1995, something dramatic went wrong. The story is told by the reporter, Jack Reimer from the Houston Chronicle. Just as Perlman finished the first few bars, one of the strings of his violin broke. You could hear it snap. It sounded like a gunshot across the room. There was no mistaking what that sound meant. What he had to do. People who were there that night thought to themselves, well, we figured he'd have to get up, put on his braces again, pick up the crutches and limp his way off stage to either find another violin or else find another string for his violin. But he didn't. Instead, he waited a moment, took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, closed his eyes, and signaled the conductor to begin again. The orchestra began, and he played from where he had left off. He played with such passion and power and purity as they had never heard before. Of course, anyone knows that it's impossible to play a symphonic work on a violin with just 3 strings. I know that, and you know that, but that night Itzhak Perlman refused to believe that. You could see him modulating, changing, and recomposing the piece in his head. At one point, it sounded like he was detuning the strings to get new sounds from them that they had never performed before. When he finished, there was an awesome silence in the room. And then everybody rose and cheered. An extraordinary outburst of applause from every corner of the auditorium. Everyone was on their feet, screaming and cheering, doing everything possible to show how much everyone appreciated what he'd done. He smiled and wiped the sweat from his brow, and he waved his violin bow in the air to quiet everybody down, and then he said, not boastfully, but in a quiet, pensive, reverent tone, you know, sometimes it's the artist's task to find out how much music you can still make with what you have left. is the way of Jesus Christ. That is the way of his life. After Jesus had given so much of his life in his 3 years of public ministry, serving people, he had one thing left to give: his life. He would give up his life, die on the cross, so that we could live free, forgiven lives for the glory of God. We live, if you pardon the analogy, we live to make music for Christ, right where we live every day. At first, as we're young and as we get a little older, we live to make music with everything we have, and we have much. And then we discover as time goes on that we find ourselves having less and less ability, perhaps, but we still seek to make music for the glory of God. And then when it is no longer possible for whatever reason, God says that every day of our lives, to make music with what we have left. And what do we have left right now? Well, we have our clothes, do we not? Take the shirt off our back. And if you want to keep your shirts on, that's fine with me. I'm keeping mine on today. But if we keep our shirts on, our cloaks on, let's roll up our sleeves and show Christ's loving compassion to all the people we encounter every day. And show the Lord that we continue to be part of the cheering, praising crowd of people who celebrate him and lift him up all the time for the glory and praise